I've always said I will be very, very, very much unapologetically pro rejoining the EU. That's not going to change anytime soon. Um, Neither do I believe anyone else who is pro EU. We should not be ashamed to be, pro rejoining or evangelizing, what we are saying and what we believe will be in the best interests, of the UK. Um, and there are again a lot of opportunities. I really do believe now that do point to that. You look at the polls; those polls that indicate how people feel about sort of Brexit, how bad a decision it was, the changing attitude that Real Britons have had about the EU, fundamentally are in our favour. They are going in our favour a lot quicker and faster than a lot of people predicted, saying we wouldn't even be here at this point. And then, of course, you've got Labour, still very, very, very much, and I will say, admittedly, and even annoyingly, I think many, I think, in other people who do share my opinions on the EU and sort of the UK rejoining it are probably very annoyed about it. But I do understand, they don't want to come across as suddenly saying, "Well, you are the party that's trying to overturn Brexit," because don't get me wrong, the Conservatives could still make a big sort of populist comeback if they felt that was the way that they wanted to sort of use it. Now, could could it still be an engine for recovery that they could potentially use in the next general election? Who knows? Who knows? But they are still being very, very, very cautious indeed. But Lammy and Starmer going to Europe, having these talks, which overwhelmingly have been very, very good, very, very positive. Not a lot of stuff has come out of these talks yet, but the fact that we have been so warmly received, so warmly sort of accepted. Well, bear in mind, a lot of people in my comments prior to this, where I was talking about this, saying, you won't even make it past the door. These will just be, warm words and nothing else, has been shown fundamentally wrong. And you can see these, I don't know, people in my comments probably beneath this video. These comments have been, constant throughout this. But as I've always said, guess what? You are wrong. I don't mind waiting all this time for time to prove me right. And time has proved me right on this. You look at next year when we're probably going to sign the big sort of defense agreement with Germany. I think even more because with the next possible 15 days, who knows who could be in the White House? And then what does this mean then about European security, where it has always sort of been the guaranteed, you know, truth that America would be there? And if you have someone like Donald Trump, would that be the case? And you have Germany saying it wants to go a lot further and farther with this agreement, that it wants to keep the UK within the EU's orbit. You've got a whole race at the moment with subsidies, both in the US and the EU, where the UK is going to get caught in between these things. So domestically for us, that and economically, that is going to be something that we are going to have to sort of deal with. So there's a ton of sort of questions and stuff and conversations we are going to have a lot about this, but having these conversations is important. It is massively important to have these conversations. And I'm really glad that we are having these conversations a lot quicker, I think, than people think. The fact that Brexit has been brought up in the House of Commons more than, the past, 6 years to highlight, hey, this is a problem. We need to talk about this. How are we going to solve this? That's a positive step forward. That is a very positive step forward. And sometimes, as they say, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Well, here we are. And I think we're a lot, far along that journey than I think most people tend to sort of really realize. And this is, of course, where you come to someone like Peter Mandelson, who was talking at a event in Edinburgh, and this is what he had to say on this. So he said this. He said, "The very hard Brexit that was forced on us by Boris Johnson has meant that we are now that we are now driving with the economic handbrake on, and we can't let that handbrake off. It is what it is. What it is. It is difficult to see this being reversed within the next decade. That's not just about our politics, but the politics of the European Union. And we are repeating, of course, the mistakes of the Brexit economic saboteurs if we think that re-entry to the EU or even renegotiation is anything like a unilateral decision on our part. It isn't. And again, it isn't, but for the fact that we have seen these talks, these renegotiations, this re-engaging with Europe be so openly, warmly received and being receptive by many of these European countries, I think is a huge step forward. I think that is incredibly good for AO to be that. And we'll have to see how these develop over time. But I think this is really stepping up good future relations with the EU. So the new government will at least now have to focus in the meantime on trying to mitigate these high barriers that we've created to our nearest and largest market as best as we possibly can. Again, that's what Keir Starmer does look like to be doing. And I've always said Labour strategy should be do that and then just go, this is Brexit. This is as best as it is possibly can be. But, Brexit is the economic handbrake on our economy. We can't take that handbrake off. Are you sure you still want to progress with this? Because otherwise, our economy is hampered permanently if you do this. I think going back to the UK populace like that, maybe in a couple of years' time, is I think going to be really good for certainly the UK to sort of re-engage with the main sort of political parties to re-engage with us to once again restart this conversation. And these are the conversations that we need to be having about, rejoining. It is, of course, a lot about our politics and getting once again to that point to get the main parties once again to be pro-European and to be openly pro-European again. So he also had this to say as well. So the truth is, this could be at least a conversation that starts in 10 years' time. It could be longer, but the beginning of a conversation is not the end of that. It is not the resolution of our the resolution of our relationship to the European Union. I think it will be very hard to persuade people in the European Union to revisit or to re-engage and start getting another negotiation about Britain's membership of the European Union for a long time now. I'm sorry to say that, but they've had it up to here with us. And again, that's true. And again, we're not instantly, talking about rejoining membership of the European Union next year. We're nowhere near that point at the moment. But rebuilding good relations in the way that Starmer and Lammy have been doing is good. Might not seem like they've done nothing, but in reality they've done quite a lot, really, for us diplomatically when it comes to here, and we have seen that be reciprocated by European countries asking for a youth movement scheme. I really do think there is nothing that we should be scared of by accepting that youth movement scheme. We have youth movement schemes with Australia that they barely use because, again, it's a country halfway around the world. We have one with Canada. There's stuff we should not be afraid of accepting this, because not only would it be good for, young people from in the EU, but also people here in the UK. So once again, it's a win-win. So there you go. So anyway, Peter Mandelson continued. He said, now that does not mean to say that we can and should not do nothing, of course. We've got to rebuild trust, as we said, mutual respect, and we've got to identify areas where where we can cooperate and collaborate. Defense and security, of course, is an example. We've got to find ways to mitigate trade costs that we are now incurring. It depends on how successfully we rebuild the foundations. It also depends and what's going to go on in the rest of the world. What is going to go on in the rest of Europe that might actually make us now converge a bit more? What happens in the United States that might bring Europe further together and quicker than we think? Well, of course, I think we know who he's talking about in that reference. But if the UK didn't begin talks on rejoining the EU, let's say in the mid 2030s, that would be at least nearly 20 years since the EU referendum in 2016, or close to a generation now in political terms. So, again, entirely possible. I think entirely doable. And I think Mandelson is right. We shouldn't just sit there and just do nothing. Um, doing nothing, is the worst decision I think you can make. I think, Winston Churchill, probably one of his most famous quotes, the worst thing you can do, um, the best thing, of course, you can do in a crisis is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing, but the worst thing you can do is do nothing. I really do think that is the situation that we are, and I think you can say Keir Starmer, rightly or wrongly, doing things there, but hey, he is moving things closer than we were, like, certainly with the last government. Certainly with the last government. And I think it's up to sort of, again, people, like myself, who are pro EU, part of the Labour Party, to really start to push that, to really start getting that message on that we really want to see progress made, with the EU, to be ambitious on a lot of these things. So, we'll have to see, of course, what happens in that regard. But again, it's still very early days. Still very early days. But we'll see what happens. I know there's a big meeting between Starmer and Ursula von der Leyen coming up soon. Obviously, we're looking at that agreement with potentially Germany, looking maybe at starting some of that stuff maybe next year with them. Potentially could happen a lot quicker and sooner, of course, depending what happens in America with the next, 15, 14 days, I think it is now. So we'll see what happens. But I do believe, Mandelson is right. Looking where we can collaborate, where we can cooperate, and rebuilding those foundations of trust. And Lammy and Starmer have started rebuilding those foundations of trust. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.